In the coaching and info space, as of 2026, it's even more essential that you have a webinar in place. And the reason for that is because the audience you're selling, they've already bought coaching programs before, courses, masterminds, and they've been disappointed, they've been burnt, they've trusted a guru or an expert that promised them a certain outcome, and they failed to meet expectations. So now people are less trusting, they're more skeptical, and they want to, think about it a little bit more and vet, the person selling the course before they decide to, pull the trigger and buy the coaching program. And with the webinar funnel, you can basically solve this problem because it allows you to, spend 1 to 2 hours with the audience, and you can show your testimonials, your case study, your personal story, talk to them about the coaching program, the offer, and, educate them all in one sitting. And it allows you to, shorten the sales cycle as well. Because think about it, someone has to, watch certain amount of hours of your content before they become a customer. And typically this process takes weeks or even months, right? They have to watch YouTube videos, Instagram Reels, or even some TikToks about who you are as a person, what your coaching program is about, and why they should trust your offer, right? And this takes time. It takes them, certain amount of time before they could, get enough trust and enough, confidence in who you are as a person and your coaching program. But with the webinar funnel, you can basically skip all of that because it lets you spend 1 to 2 hours with the audience, and they could go through this entire presentation that, educates them, handles objections, and then pitches them at the end. So basically the webinar funnel allows you to, basically shortcut the sales cycle and, be able to sell people a lot quicker because they go from cold to knowing who you are in a very short period of time in those 1 to 2 hours on the webinar. And another thing as well, it also helps you, build trust with those really skeptical buyers who just need way more convincing. They need way more proof before they could decide to invest in your coaching program or in your offer. So that's the good thing about webinars. And I'm going to be breaking down this process about why webinars are so essential in 2026. I'm also going to show you how having a webinar funnel in place complements your other funnels and overall just helps you, convert your audience so much faster and so much better. All right, so let's go deeper into what the sales cycle looks like. Let's say, for example, someone has, doesn't have a webinar funnel and they're just simply running a VSL, an application funnel, or a DM funnel. They have no webinar, so whenever they get a lead, they have to send that lead to content. This content could be a YouTube video, an Instagram Reel, or a TikTok. And like I said, they have to spend, a certain amount of time watching these YouTube videos, these Instagram videos, or these TikToks before they maybe buy. And this process is very slow. It takes, weeks or even months. Meanwhile, someone that has a webinar in place alongside, a VSL funnel, an application funnel, or a DM funnel, and they have, a webinar complementing that, they're going to go from lead. Maybe they watch some content along the way, but typically you can send them from lead to webinar to decision. So the reason for that is because the sales cycle is significantly smaller if there's a webinar in place. Because think about it, when there's no webinar in place, they have to really watch this content because the content's the only way. It's going to be the only way that they can understand your background story and learn about what your offer is about and why they should trust you. So this process is slower. This process takes more time. And even though they might watch a lot of content, the way that the content is packaged, yes, it does, share some, social proof, some testimonials, some case studies, and educates around your offer, but it's not packaged in a way that can guarantee a sale, right? Because pretty much they're watching on their own, accord. They're watching some, reels, they're watching some YouTube videos, and they're watching whatever seems interesting to them. And it's not formatted or, packaged in a way that's going to allow them to, become a customer 100%. So that's why it becomes a maybe buys and why it takes a month or even longer sometimes for them to actually be able to become a customer. Meanwhile, with the webinar, you can, get them to register for the webinar, right? You can collect their email, their phone number, send them to the webinar, and a webinar is 1 to 2 hours. Think about how many YouTube videos they would have to watch or how many Instagram Reels or TikToks they would have to watch in order to have 1 to 2 hours of content. And not only that, the webinar is structured in a way where it shows your background story, your testimonials, your case study, it handles objections, and it packages your content in a way where not only are you educating them, but you're building trust, you're limiting, these objections that they have, you're shifting beliefs, and you're getting them nurtured and, having the confidence that you know what you're talking about and that they should invest in your coaching program or your offer. There's a greater chance that they're going to decide to become a customer if they follow down this path. And like I said, because you basically have a format that packages all of this for them, it takes 2 hours instead of months in order for them to become a customer. And that's one of the key advantages of having a webinar alongside a VSL funnel, a DM funnel, or some of these other funnels that you might have in place. Now, let me share with you some numbers so you can get a better idea of how the webinar funnel works. Let's say 1,000 people register, 300 people show up, and 30 buy. If your offer price point is $5,000, that's an additional $150,000 in revenue you now have because you have a webinar in place. And yes, having $150,000 in additional revenue is the reason why we run webinars and why we have this funnel in place. But there's another layer that you haven't uncovered yet, and another benefit that you get by running webinar funnels. So let's go back to the numbers. 300 people showed up, 30 bought, but there's still 270 people who are non-buyers who watched the entire webinar presentation. They saw your backstory, they saw your testimonials, your case studies. They were there for the educational part of the webinar, and they have more information on your offer, your coaching program, and they're already pretty warm and you've already built a lot of trust with them. But for whatever reason, they weren't ready to buy. Maybe they didn't have the money, maybe the timing wasn't right, or for whatever reason, they just weren't able to invest in your offer in that given moment in time. So what you can do then is you can take them from the webinar, which you now have their email and phone number, and you can redirect them to YouTube content. You can send them to Instagram content and TikTok content as well. But ideally, you want to send them to YouTube content because it's longer format. And if they can binge watch several of your videos, that's hours of content, that allow you to nurture and to build even more trust and to get them, confident that your offer and your coaching program is worth the money. And once they go from the webinar to the YouTube content, in the description of the YouTube videos, you can have an application funnel, a book a call funnel, or some calendar for them to book a call, or even a checkout page so they can go straight to buying the coaching program. And that's one path you can take. You can go from webinar, YouTube content, and into another funnel where they can book a call or buy the program. Now, another path you could also take is take them from webinar, and right here in this middle path, have some email sequences, remind them what the offer was, remind them about your coaching program, reminding them the benefits, and, occasionally sending some case studies or some testimonials to get them to, finally trust or remember your offer enough so that eventually they go to the application funnel, to the book a call funnel, or to the calendar to book a call or buy the coaching program. So that's one path. And inside this middle path right here between the webinar and the application funnel, you want to send email sequences. These email sequences are going to nurture them, and it's going to keep that offer top of mind so eventually they do convert. From the webinar, you can again send them more email sequences, nurture them, build more trust with them, keep reminding them about the offer, and then send them to a VSL funnel. In the VSL funnel, there's going to be a video. It's going to be, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long your VSL funnel is. They're going to get more content. You're going to show them more testimonials, more proof, and you're going to, build even more trust with them on the VSL funnel. And eventually they're going to book a call or buy the coaching program. So that's one path you could take with webinars. You can send them from the webinar, YouTube content, webinar, or application funnel with an email sequence in the middle, or you can take them from webinar to VSL funnel. And the good thing about the webinar funnel is that you're nurturing and you're building trust, and you're getting people very close to becoming customers. Let's say, for example, someone just, discovered your content a week ago or a month ago, and they've only watched a couple reels, a couple, TikToks, maybe a few YouTube videos. They know a little bit about your offer. They know a little bit about your coaching program, and they know who you are, but only at a basic level. But by the time they come to the webinar, they have a lot of context on who you are. You've already built a lot of trust, and you built a lot of rapport because you were educating them for 2 hours on the webinar. So now they trust you. And even though they're not customers, these 270 people who are non-buyers, they trust you, they believe in you, and pushing them to another, YouTube video, an application funnel, or a VSL funnel is a very easy way to convert them down the line. And even these 700 people who didn't attend the webinar, but they went through the email sequences and they're now, part of your email and phone number list, you can redirect them to YouTube, application funnel, or VSL funnel. So that's the good thing about webinars. You're not only going to get these 30 sales, that's going to be $150,000 in additional revenue with the webinar, but they're also going to give you access to these 270 people who are pretty warm and these 700 people who are now part of your email and phone number list. So you can, blast them out to YouTube, application funnel, or VSL funnel. So that's another benefit or a hidden benefit that webinar funnels have, is that you just collect so much, emails, so many phone numbers, and you nurture people. And even though they don't become customers straight off the bat, you now have the opportunity to convert them with a different funnel or with more content. Now, here's another benefit of running the webinar funnel. So once you run a webinar, you now have the email and the phone numbers of 970 people who did not buy. Yes, these 30 people already became customers from the first webinar run, but you now have 970 people who are still on your list. You still have their emails and phone numbers. So what you could do for the next webinar run is that you can promote to this list of people so you can get them to attend a second webinar. And on the second webinar, they already have, a lot more context and they're a lot warmer. And maybe they've already, gone to like a first webinar. They've already gone to some YouTube content and now they've gone through some more email sequences and now they're here on the second webinar now. So it's going to be a lot easier to convert these people and you're not starting from scratch. And that's the good thing about having webinars is that over time, this starts to compound. Every single webinar run, you have a bigger list. You have more people who did not buy from the last webinar that you could push to the next webinar. And it just gives you, this effect, a flywheel effect that lets you, continuously compound. And each additional webinar run, the list gets even bigger and you can make even more revenue just by having, this cycle of, first webinar, next webinar, and so on, right? Another benefit as well is that if you have a challenge funnel or you have some live events, maybe in person or online, you already have a list to promote this entire, challenge funnel or live event too. So these 970 people that didn't buy, this list becomes bigger over time. And, you have more people you can promote to for your challenge funnel and your live event. All right, so let's take a step back. So with the webinar funnel, you get like the ability to be able to, redirect people to multiple, funnels or even YouTube content or to your next webinar or your challenge funnel or in-person event. And that's a very good benefit of having the webinar funnel. It lets you, basically, move people along the sales cycle, along the customer journey a lot quicker and get them to eventually convert. Even if you don't get them from the first webinar, you're able to, close them in less time because it's 2 hours of content, 2 hours of nurturing and trust building that you get with the webinar funnel. And it just makes it overall easier to sell. And that's one benefit. But let's zoom out and let's go back into like the problem that I told you that's going on in 2026. The people who have bought courses before, coaching programs, they've already been burned. They've already been disappointed. And it's not going to be so easy to, get them to buy from just going from lead to content to maybe, buying the program. That path used to work in 2017 and 2021. But nowadays it's a lot harder to do that. So you really do need to have a webinar in place to take your lead to the webinar and then, bounce them to another, funnel or another, piece of content or even, an in-person event. You need to be able to do that if you want to be able to sell consistently in 2026 because the people need to go through more touch points and they need more content and they need more nurturing before they feel comfortable becoming a customer. And if you don't have a webinar funnel in place, you can still convert them with content. You can convert them with your VSL, your application funnel, or even your in-person events if you have any. But it's going to take months or even weeks to get them to convert. But with the webinar funnel, you get 2 hours, to have the opportunity to close them. And even if you don't close them in these 2 hours, you now have the ability to send them to another, funnel. But also when they get to your YouTube content, your application funnel, or your VSL funnel, they're not going in there with no context. They're not going in there cold. They already, know who you are. They already know your coaching program. They already have some context. So this VSL funnel is going to have a greater chance of converting them. This application funnel is going to get more people coming in if they've already come to this webinar in the past. And same for the content. The content is going to hit better if they already have more context from your webinar. So that's one of the good things about the webinar funnel. It becomes basically an engine that, pushes people into different directions, but it also solves that problem, which is the problem that the people nowadays in 2026 just need more trust building, more nurturing, and more information before they decide to buy. And that's one of the main problems the webinar funnel solves. All right, so you now understand the power of the webinar funnel and how it allows you to close the trust gap that we have in 2026. You already know that, people are more skeptical, they're less trusting, and they require more information before they make a buying decision. You now understand how the webinar funnel allows you to solve that exact problem. You also know how the webinar funnel can, allow you to send people to your more content, another funnel, or even an in-person event to eventually close them down the line. So with all of this in mind, if you want to talk about potentially building this into your coaching and info business, make sure that you book a call in the description below. If you're already making $30,000 or more in revenue, you have a proven offer, and you have an audience that trusts you, you can benefit a lot from having this funnel in place. So if you want to talk about building that, make sure that you book a call and we can talk more. One other thing that I would like to say is that building out this entire funnel is very time intensive and it requires a lot of attention to detail because I need to fully understand your offer, your niche, and your market in order to be able to build this entire thing for you. So I can only take on a certain amount of coaches each month. So if you want to work with me directly and you want to talk about potentially building this entire funnel for you and what this will look like for your coaching and info business, make sure that you book a call and we can talk more.